The following recording is a replay of an interview I did for the Autumn of Healing Summit in October 2024, which was host to over 100 experts in healing from around the world. This summit was organized by Matthias and Doris Badner, and I had the privilege of being involved in their 2023 summit as well, called the Network to Heal Summit. I highly recommend you subscribe to their newsletter at matthiasbadner.de so you can be notified of any future summits. Matthias and Doris' summits are world-renowned, and every year you'll find the world's forerunners in health and healing speaking at their events, such as Dr. Bruce Lipton and Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. So be sure to subscribe at www.matthiasbadner.de to be notified of any future events. That's MATHIASBERNER.de. Enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Autumn of Healing Summit. Today, I have the great privilege of introducing you to Declan Hammond, who I very recently, just a few weeks ago, I had the privilege of meeting in person in Bali and celebrating your birthday in Bali as well. And I'm still on such a high. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Eugenia.
It's so lovely to have you on, Declan. When Matthias and Doris asked me to get speakers for the Autumn of Healing Summit, and the whole idea of it is transforming pain into vitality, you are, for me, the personification of somebody who has transformed the ultimate, unimaginable, biggest pain that a human being can ever experience, and transforming that into something amazing. And really, you shine that in everything that you do, and the way that you're able to hold space for people and the work that you do, and the inspiration that we gather from you because of your own life's journey that you've had. I just had to get you on to the Autumn of Healing. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today, and you can go straight into your presentation and tell us all about it if you don't mind.
Great. Well, thank you. That's a beautiful introduction. So for me, the work that I do with people that has obviously evolved from the place of my own journey, and I've experienced that the greatest pain is often the invitation to the greatest healing. And I guess that's the essence of homeopathy. So what I wanted to talk today about is what I'm doing in most of my day job. It's for people presenting with some of the most incredibly challenging spiritual pain. And there is a term for this in transpersonal psychology, spiritual emergency. And I'm very fond of the idea of working from emergency to emergence, moving from a place of deep pain into a new way of being in the world, to a spiritual emergence. So I'd like to speak to that today. And first of all, I'd like to introduce you and acknowledge two dear friends who've since passed. Michael Corey was a consultant psychiatrist who 25 years ago called me up and he said, Anya and myself want to talk to you. And I sat down, and the first thing he said to me, and he said, why don't homeopaths get homeopathy? I was quite taken aback because I knew of his reputation as a consultant psychiatrist and really great work he'd been doing. And he banged the table again. He said, don't they know that homeopathy is a medicine for the soul, for damaged souls, for lost souls? Don't they know that it helps them to find themselves, to come back to themselves? And I handed them my card, and it was Declan Hammond's Soul Medicine, and we shook hands, and we worked with probably about 500 patients over a period of about 15 years. Michael was a psychiatrist who never gave an antidepressant because he reckoned that depression was an emotion, not a disease. And constantly, he worked across the road for me. He sent patients across. He said, you don't need medicine from me. You need a remedy from Hammond. Go across the road to Hammond. So massive respect to these two, Anya and Michael, who just were massive teachers for me, and who you'll see their names showing up during the session here today.
Beautiful photo of them as well. So much joy in that.
Yeah. So my intention today was that to invite love and compassion to the consulting room, to create a deeper understanding and empathy for patients in challenging mental and spiritual states, to offer an invitation to you all to engage with soul work, and to offer some useful models for patients healing that I found useful. And I could talk about my experience of it, but what I'd like to do today is share a number of my patients' experience of their challenge and what's how they were challenged and how they came through this. And I'd like to finish then with, just different strategies for handling things. People are in these difficult states of mind, and there are some strategies that I found very useful and some tools that I like to offer. Now, obviously, I work with homeopathy as my main modality and the medicine that I work. But I found that just using homeopathic remedies on their own is not enough in terms of creating mental health. I don't see my patients as something that are broke and needing to be fixed. I see them as people with potential for deep healing, and that's the kind of work that I do. So Brenda, one of my patients, she said, the first thing she said to me, I used to be normal, but it drove me mad. And I was a bit taken aback to hear this as an opening in a conversation. And I realized she went on to speak about how she had extraordinary sensitivities, how she was a really, a very unusual child, felt and saw things that other people didn't feel and see. And she said that my attempts to fit in, it actually drove me mad. So this is something that I'd like to hold, that, people trying to fit in, people who experience the world in a different way. They're not broke, they're just different. And often the attempt to fit into normal society literally drives them mad. So I'd like to just talk about this. There's some wonderful research done for colleagues in Liverpool and England and for the predicators of mental distress. These things, when people come to me in a broken place, in a place of great challenge in their lives, they're not coming with something that's just happened. Research has shown that they're predicators very early in their lives. And for those of you who work with children, really important to actually see that mental health distress and difficulties typically start in childhood. And these two guys have written wonderfully about this, and they have written a book, in fact, about the topics, the causes of mental health problems. So I just want to share some of their work because it's been very helpful for me. Without knowing what's gone on in a person's life and how they've made sense of it for themselves, some people's ways of coping with it all can look a bit strange, even totally crazy. And I found that a lot of my colleagues treat people as strange, crazy, and as people that need to be fixed, and to try to put them into boxes. We have labels for it, we have psychiatric labels for it, we have homeopathic labels for it. But looking to see how people have made sense of their lives, this is really important. So the mother's ill health, her poor nutrition, and her mental health during pregnancy, being the product of an unwanted pregnancy, early loss of parents via death or abandonment, attachment difficulties, children witnessing interpersonal violence, and very commonly intergenerational trauma that gets passed down, dysfunctional parents, particularly affectionist over control. You do what I tell you to do, that kind of controlling parent. And parental substance abuse, mental health problems, and even criminal behavior. People who have abuse, different kinds of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, childhood emotional or physical neglect, and very, very commonly bullying in childhood. Children with medical illnesses that have been missing school a lot. And at the moment in Ireland, we have a country of 6 million people, and we have 130,000 refugees from the war in Ukraine and 30,000 from the war in the Middle East. So we're getting to treat an awful lot of children who come out of the background of war trauma. Poverty, racism, and other forms of social inequality. So all of these are really red flags. So when I'm here in children's background, then I'm really aware that if these things are not addressed in childhood, I'm likely going to be dealing with teenagers who are very damaged, or young adults or older adults who will have huge mental health issues. So what was something that really shocked me, he said those who had experienced 3 types of these trauma were 18 times more likely to be psychotic than non-abused patients. These statistics are incredible. And people who had experienced 5 of these types of trauma were 193 times more likely to be psychotic. So
Wow. And
these
how
are
many
just
clients do
one.
we see that have several of those types of abuse? I mean,
Absolutely. It's
medical abuse wasn't even, I know you had medical illnesses, children missing school,
yeah,
but medical abuse is
absolutely,
something I see a
totally.
lot.
Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. So it's really, really common to have
Mm.
many of these types of abuse, but the statistics are
Wow.
absolutely shocking. So most of my patients come to me with labels, and very often it is a label of psychosis or schizophrenia. And when you look at their backgrounds, it's very understandable where these things have come from. So, Michael, again, psychological distress is a valid human experience. It's the expression of the unique interaction of a human being with the world around them. So again, rather than pathologizing people, rather than put them into boxes, recognize that this is their expression, the experiences they have, no matter how strange their presentation or their symptoms seem to be, it's their unique expression of the world's interaction with the world around them. Okay. So over the last 30 years, I've spent a lot of time in the Amazon. I've spent a lot of time with indigenous healers, and I've been very interested in how they have responded to madness, to the kind of states that I see in my practice. And some things have come through very, very strongly for me. And I've noticed that, very often when people are touched by madness, it's considered to be a blessing. And I was a bit surprised with this. And I started asking a lot of questions when I was down in the jungle. And they said, well, this is a blessing. You're touched by the gods. This is a sign that your soul journey has deepened. And that now that you're hearing voices and seeing visions, these are not something that should be taken away. These are seen as your awakening to non-ordinary states of consciousness. This is a gift from the gods. We need to look after you. We don't need to take these states away from you. We need to see these things as a tremendous gift, both for yourself and the community. And that these states that you're experiencing are a potential initiation, a new way of being for you in the world. These states in the community are considered to be something really to be respected and not to be pathologized. And not only are they considered to be respected, they're actively supported by the healer, the shaman, and the community themselves. And that these are considered to be a resource from the community. And a resource from the community, but something that has a great potential for a new spiritual emergence for the person who is blessed by the gods. Now, this changed my work. I came across these kind of mindsets 30 something years ago, and this has really colored my work because people presenting to doctors, to homeopaths, when I was really challenged by the death of my son many years ago, I was in a state that when I went to Michael to talk, he said, if you presented to any of my colleagues, they would have you locked up because the states you were experiencing were madness. So thankfully I had enough experience of being in these places with other people that I realized that this is my potential for initiation here. So this Maladoma Some was a teacher of mine, and he said the experience he had when he went to see somebody, a friend of his who was in a mental institution. He said it was like he was really shocked to see this person locked up. He said what the experience that he experienced was that his friend was experiencing the same symptoms as people in his village in West Africa, but in those places they would be looked after. But he said, but so this is how the healers who are attempting to be born are treated in this Western culture. He said, what a loss. What a loss that a person who is finally being aligned with the power from the other world is just being wasted. And this for me is an incredibly wise. This was a healer who came from Burkina Faso and was working in the States. So his job, Maladoma in his traditional language means bridger of worlds. So he brought his wonderful gifts from West Africa to America and shared his teachings. And the teachings were that people were having these kind of experiences all over the world. But in the traditional culture, these experiences were treated as gifts. So Anthony came to me some years ago after having been offered a particular potion, a chemical called 5-MeO-DMT. It's actually the venom from Bufo alivarius, which we
The
use in
frog.
homeopathy. So you smoke this medicine, you take a deep puff of this medicine, you go into an altered state, and with one breath, one exhale, you have lost any sense of yourself, who you are. You're in a completely non-dual reality where your experience is there is no Declan, there is no world, there is no Eugenie. I'm in this place that people talk about as the God state. And 10 minutes later, you're back. So people do this in ceremony. When he came out of it, this was experienced was 6 months before. He was in terror for the previous 6 months. He felt panic attacks. They had completely dominated his life. He was terrified he'd never recover. He was suffering intense OCD. He said it took him 3 hours to prepare himself to come to my consultation. And before he could sit down, he spent 5 minutes checking everything in the room. He said, everything in my life has been taken away. He hasn't been able to work. He hasn't been able to be together with other people. His world was completely blown apart. He had an experience that deep meditators spend years meditating to get to this non-dual place. And that state completely changes their lives. He was blown into it. In 10 minutes, he was back into normal world and his world was taken completely away. This was a state that for me, he was in an opium state. So we worked with opium, we worked with his hearing voices, and we worked with grounding activities. And after 9 months, he said, my fear is no longer running my life. I'm excited to be able to feel so deeply. He was working as a journalist. He said, I can now feel people's pain without getting lost with it. I feel a sensitivity has become so acute that I'm able to go out and I can hear trees and I can feel the ground under me. I can feel a sense of being alive beyond anything that I could ever have imagined before. This guy came to me in emergency. And what came out of it was a way of being in the world that was completely beyond his wildest dreams. He said, if you had told me that I could have lived like this, I wouldn't have believed you. So
How
great
beautiful.
teaching.
What a gift.
Yeah, indeed. I have hundreds of such cases, and I'll share a few more of them as we go through today, because these are people. This guy had been to a psychiatrist and was told he needed to be locked up. He had been to a couple of homeopaths who said, oh, we need to fix you. He said, the greatest gift, he said, that you gave me, you didn't judge me. You didn't tell me I was crazy. You accepted who I was and what I was. So this work of spiritual emergency has been done by lots of other people before me. And the term spiritual emergency came from the work of Stan Groff, who's one of my life's heroes. And he talked about spiritual emergency as the hero's journey. And he gave a number of different kinds of spiritual emergencies. Some of them have come out of peak experiences, like my friend's experience that he'd had from the smoking the bufo. Very, very intense experience. It can come from deep, deep meditation experiences where people's kundalini has opened up, where that spiritual energy rises up inside them. And in really, really intense experiences. I've had people who've come to me after near-death experiences where they've been in accidents, where they've seen their death, where they've come back and the world is completely different. Where in their experiences, they have past life memories have opened up, where people feel like their whole psychology is changing, where people are going through what's called shamanic crisis, where they start hearing voices, where their psychic opens up, where they start channeling things, where they start having spirit guides communicating them, and where they have close encounters with beings from other planets, for UFOs, where they feel like they're possessed. Now, all of these states, when people present to psychiatrists, are automatically given psychiatric labels. And in homeopathy, we have states called delusions, and we consider these states delusions. But in my experience, these are not delusion states, and these are not pathologies, but they're definitely states that need support. So the kind of things that I've noticed that people get triggered into these states, the breaking things, or acute trauma, where people have had a very, very intense experience, where they've had, in my experience, an intense grief, intense loss, intense distress of seeing something, of being confronted with somebody. Somebody recently had seen her friend killed. I worked with somebody at a festival 2 weekends ago. She came to me in massive distress. The first day of the festival, she had a phone call, and her best friend was found hanging in his bathroom. So these kind of acute states, she was hearing voices, people were telling her things, she was hearing dead people's voices coming in her head. And I worked with her over 3 days, and she'll be coming to me as a patient. Chronic trauma over long periods of time, where people go through war, torture, sexual abuse, neglect. And I do a lot of work at music festivals where people have used mind-altering substances, especially skunk cannabis, psychedelics, large amounts of cocaine, alcohol, amphetamine, alcohol again for some strange reason,
Lots of alcohol,
psychiatric
it's Ireland.
psychiatric medications. If you look at the side effects of the antipsychotic drugs,
Mm.
psychosis features as a major part of it. Most of the antidepressant drugs have psychosis and suicidal ideation as side effects. Massive mood overdrive, intense fear, intense grief, intense anger, and unusually intense experiences. Increasingly, I've had many, many patients who've done deep, deep tantra work where they've had incredibly intense orgasmic experiences, and it has literally blown their mind and their nervous system. I've had people who regularly come back from intense spiritual practices, intense meditation, too much meditation, too many yoga, intense practices, pop people set open. And all of these things are states that can trigger these kind of emergency breaks. So key features of this is that the intensity of the experiences becomes all consuming. It's like their life gets taken over by it. It's really impossible for patients to cope at an everyday level. The inner world, the voices, the experiences, the visions, they say, can take over and blur confusingly with the outer world. What people are seeing is like it gets really confusing as the voices that I'm hearing. Is this voice outside or inside? Is what I'm seeing? It's a real confusion. People very often have strange physical pains in their body, sensations, twitchings, and the mind becomes really impossible to deal with. Yeah, it's sleep. It just can't turn off. I've had people come to me, they haven't slept for a week, 10 days, because the mind is running so hard. And everything gets felt like a roller coaster, emotions coming through, overwhelming emotions, going from intense ecstatic bliss to intense grief to intense loss. It's like a sense of that everything is falling away, including the sense of the self. And there's a term for this called ego death. There's also a sense of like, I am chosen by God. I am God. I am the goddess here in this situation. And quite extraordinarily, when people are in that state, I've experienced myself feeling and experiencing that I'm in the presence of the God or the goddess there. And it's just a remarkable feeling to be in that state. It's like it's been in the presence of the sacred, except this person can't function in the daily life. So are we dealing with the benign psychotic state that's bringing about a spiritual emergence to higher levels of consciousness, or is it a malignant psychotic state where the person is going to regress into a state of breakdown? Which of these very much depends on how we respond to it.
Mm.
So the rest of the talk is how do we respond to this kind of things? Because when we treat these things as something that has to be cured, something that's terrible, that's something that's sick, something that's psychotic, something that's schizophrenic, then we very likely will be part of the problem rather than part of the solution.
Mm. That's a whole different mindset. I'm feeling myself being a little bit challenged by this, actually, by this different way of looking at it, because, yeah, I'm interested to hear what else you have to say, because I'm just noticing some triggers coming up for me. Like, how do you even identify and how do you look at it? But anyway, that's why I'm going to stay quiet and just see where this goes.
So this is another lady who came to me. She was 41 years old. She came to me after being with a psychiatrist who said, you have now had a psychotic break. She had been to an Indian woman, an Indian saint who's called Amma. She's come to Ireland every couple of years and she offers people hugs. It's a very, very powerful experience for people who've had it. And when she came and had her hug, she said, my heart exploded. My whole being expanded into pure light. Now I'm hearing spirits talking to me. I'm seeing bright, colorful, angelic presences everywhere. She said waves of bliss completely continue to overwhelm me. This was months, 6 months after the experience of the hug with Amma. She had was such bliss, but she said, I go from bliss to terror. And she said, in this state, when I'm in bliss, I have tears fall down. I just feel like, thank God I've had this experience. Thank you, Amma. And then terror overwhelms me and I feel cut off from the world. I can't function in my daily life. I'm completely overwhelmed by it. Her state was a state that lots of people have from when they work with a particular medicine called peyote. We know this in homeopathy as anhelonium. So I worked with her over 3 months. She said the remedy brought her back to herself. She said, I've developed a deep spiritual practice that I never had before. She said, I'm going around in my work. She was a primary school teacher. And I feel like I love everyone. I feel like I
Oh.
have a huge love and compassion for my children. She
Mm.
says, my friends have taken to calling me Saint Francis. I feel like I've been reborn spiritually. And I asked her, I said, well, what really helped? And she said, well, obviously your remedy. But she said, you didn't treat me as if I was crazy. You saw my potential. You saw that I had the potential to heal this. She said, and she started to cry. And she said, listen, can I give you a hug? I feel that my words have touched you very deeply, and I'd like to give you a hug. So, and she gave
Oh.
me a hug, and we were both in tears with it. And it was, but that sense of rebirth, she would be still in the mental hospital that the doctors wanted to put her in because of that experience. So it was the overwhelming spiritual experience she had that popped it. But interestingly, it was my ability to be able to stay present with her that was her big takeaway, not my clever prescribing with homeopathy that I'd come up with this wonderful remedy, because it wasn't amazingly clever prescribing. So one of the most challenging things that I found to deal with people having these non-ordinary states is people hearing voices, and hearing voices or seeing visions, or have other unusual perceptions. People's sensory experiences are opening wide up when they're in these states. And I have to say, thanks to a mentor of mine, a lady called Jackie Dillon, who at one stage in her own journey had 46 different voices in her head. She was a survivor of incredible sexual abuse in her childhood, and her survival was the or these voices. So the work that I've had, she said, the kind of things that come up are very often as a result of trauma. And Fiona was one of these patients. She presented to me after she had come out of a relationship where she had been repeatedly raped in a relationship. She said she had become absolutely overwhelmed by the intensity of all of the emotions that she was experiencing. She said everything had opened up. She said, I felt like a deep, 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 unbearable grief. She said all the boundaries that I had, physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, my psychic boundaries, they've just become non-existent. My boundaries have just been blown open. She said, I'm hearing voices, and the voices are telling me all the time to hurt myself. And she showed me her arms that she'd been cutting herself. She said, the voices are so loud that they're making me, I feel like the voices are speaking to me with such imperatives that I can't actually resist them. And part of the hurting herself was she become really, really anorexic. She was a woman, quite a tall woman. She was maybe about 178, 180 centimeters. She was 45 kilos. So she was really, really skin and bones. I worked with her over 18 months, and mostly with a remedy that is one of the big, deep remedies in my practice, a remedy called ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a remedy where there's a deep, unbearable grief, where there's a sense of everything is just blown open. Everything that was inside in the unconscious is blown out into the consciousness, and there's great difficulty in being able to discern whether there is this world or the other world. So we worked with her with this remedy, but through the time, she managed to express grief of the rape It turned out that she was also a victim of childhood rape that she had forgotten. During the process of the healing, she had come to terms with things that happened in her childhood, bullying that happened in her teenage years, bullying that happened in university when she was training, all of these things that had she pushed away into her unconscious. She said everything, it was like all the demons from hell came out. She said it was like Pandora's box of hellish things had come out. And that's one of the keynotes of the remedies, the Pandora's box, the sense of everything that's in the unconscious coming out. So it helped her to come back to herself. She said, after 18 months, she said, how are you now? She said, I'm a transformed woman. She said, my life is living at a whole other level of her life. And once again, I said, what was really characteristic of the work that we did? And she said, you didn't tell me I was crazy. You didn't treat me that I was crazy. You treated me as somebody who you recognized in me suffering. I saw that you were able to be with deep, deep suffering, that you were able to be with me in the suffering. She said, your presence was the greatest gift. This touched me deeply because we often, as therapists, as homeopaths, we often focus on the remedy we give. She said the best remedy was not your prescription, similar to what I'd heard with the other lady. She said, you being able to journey with me, to be with me in the hell that I was in. That was the great gift.
And it might also be worth mentioning that the ayahuasca that you use is different to the one that's out there with many of the pharmacies. And I was lucky enough to be gifted some of that from you in Bali. And you've actually got the ayahuasca compound that you made yourself on one of your trips to Peru from the actual ceremonial drink, which has got the other plant in it as well. That's got DMT, but I can never remember what that plant is called.
Yeah, it's a plant called Psychotria viridis. It's known as chacruna, and the two of them together are cooked together. So there is a remedy made from the vine, and that's been proved very extensively in England. And a lot of the prescribing of ayahuasca is with the vine itself. But in the traditional use, the vine on its own is not used. It's rather very, very seldom used. It's cooked together with other admixtures, particularly this medicine, chacruna. And the two of them together, they create a unique synergy. It's a unique pharmacology that they potentiate each other. So it's much more than the sum of the parts. So the remedy is available from Helios as Helios in the UK as ayahuasca compound with my name Hammond after it. It's a much more visionary experience. It's an experience of being with really expanded consciousness far more than the vine. So if you experience, you see that the ayahuasca remedy seems to be a remedy for prescribing and you're not getting the kind of results you would hope to get, then explore the compound because it works much deeper and it's a much more expansive one.
Amazing. I've already prescribed it twice this week and I cannot wait to hear how people go. And we've got it on our matrix. We've got your name in brackets so that we know that we're giving the right remedy to people. So I'm excited to hear some feedback on the follow-ups.
Very good. Thank you. Good. So just some of the things, the hearing voices, because in Ireland, this is seen as something terrible, something to be got rid of, something to be silenced, and it's often not explored. In homeopathy, we have delusions hear voices, delusions sees visions, and we treat them as that, delusions to be got rid of. In Ireland, if somebody presents with that one symptom to a psychiatrist, hearing voices, they have an 80% chance of a schizophrenia diagnosis on that one symptom. There's a major taboo in this about hearing voices, both personal taboos. People are really ashamed to tell it. I've had a lot of my patients feel really, really reluctant to actually speak about it. And there's a massive, massive thing, a social taboo around, oh, I'm hearing voices. We all hear voices. We all have voices in our heads, These are voices that become louder and louder. For the voice hearers, voices are often meaningful and often reflect really important aspects of their inner emotional state. We need to engage with these voices. We need to explore the relationship the patient has with their voices. Who are they a problem for? Very often, the voices are a problem when family members think of, oh my God, and the finger gets pointed, or the doctors, they are often not a problem. And sometimes they are. So that then we need to explore them. So what do the voices represent? Who do they represent? It's important to explore with the patient what triggers the voices, to give a profile of the voices. Yeah. this lady I was just speaking about, she had 5 different voices. One of them was constantly telling her she was okay. Other voices were telling her she needed to hurt herself. And she realized after she really listened to the voice that was telling her to cut herself was actually the voice of her ex-partner who had continually raped her. So she'd internalized those voices, and those voices had then, the more energy she gave the voices, the more power they had. So profiling them, what are the characteristics of the voices, who they are, understanding what context they have, keeping a diary of the voices and the patterns of them, and setting appropriate voices, speaking to the voices and saying, not now, and recognizing that the most difficult voices for the patients often provide the greatest potential for change. So rather than treating them as something to be got rid of, to really be curious about them, inviting the patient to be curious about them and exploring them. This has opened up so many cases for me. And it took me many, many years to realize how important the voices actually were. Because when I started doing this work 30 odd years ago, I was very much guilty of those things as well, that we need to hear these voices. That's a terrible thing. And actually realizing they can be really important. So there are a few things that I got from Jackie Dillon. You said that the people who found themselves most challenged by them are people who experience themselves as weaker than the voices, and who experience more negative voices, who experience more imperative voices. You have to do this. And we're scared to put limits to them and try to escape from the voices. And this is really, really common. Try to escape by using distraction things, using computers, using drink, using alcohol, using all sorts of different things to try and get to deaden the voices. The people who actually did really well experienced themselves as stronger. So it was encouraging the patients to realize you have the power over these voices. And people who both experience more positive voices or who actually had the ability to tune into the positive voices and just tune out from the other voices, just be able to observe them. That observation, being able to realize that the voices happen at a particular level of mind, but bringing yourself into the observing kind of mind, you can have choices, you can listen to them, and you can choose to listen to the more positive and to avoid, the more imperative voices, and setting limits to them and listening selectively to the voices. And people who communicated about their voices were the people who did best with it. So I really encourage people to talk to them. And usually people are quite reluctant to do it because my patient will very often check me out before I say it, before they speak to me and just say, well, you're not going to tell me I'm crazy. And of course, everyone is telling them they're crazy with these experiences. So I really encourage you, when patients are starting to share about these kind of voices, that these are something they can be a great source of information and a great source for healing and a great resource in terms of supporting them. So are we dealing with a breakdown or a breakthrough?
That's my question.
Yeah,
Because it seems like a fine line.
Yeah, it is a fine line. And the line is very much about how you treat them. Yeah. So these are things that can help people to seeking meaning and connection beyond their personal identity. This kind of emergence can be a greater capacity for wisdom, for compassion and respect, as well as a deeper sense of personal security and inner growth. This can be challenging, even tumultuous at times, but this is turning a crisis from a spiritual emergency into a spiritual emergence. So this is the kind of thing to move people from the crisis, from the spiritual emergency into the spiritual emergence. It's how we handle it, the way we handle it. If we pathologize these states, then this is very much how people can get stuck in it. So the patient's response to the crisis is this something that crisis needs to be integrated with a spiritual practice, with psychological growth. We need to be able to create a space for them to be able to open up into a greater kind of life. People may be temporarily overwhelmed in the state of crisis, but they need to integrate this experience and they need to have a new context for their life that allows that. So I'm going to talk quite a bit about not just treating people through the crisis, but for them to integrate the experience, they need to be able to have a new context for their life to be able to work with it. Emma Bragdon has written some beautiful stuff around this from her own spiritual emergency. So if they don't integrate the experience, even if they come out of the crisis, if that experience doesn't get integrated, this you'll find it later. And some of the earlier patients I worked with, I helped them through the crisis. And without understanding the need for integration, they came back to me a few years later, having a few other crises. They found their lives continue to break down. New traumas came up, and their ability to handle the trauma, it hadn't been developed enough for them to deal with things. So this is why I really wanting to deal with, the response of the therapist, the doctor, the homeopath is absolutely critical. How you respond will determine whether the experience is successfully integrated. Any negative reactions can intensify the individual's challenge. Treating these states as delusions, treating these states as pathology, having our own judgments around them. And yes, you've had some of your own reactions, Eugenie, here today. I feel listening to some of my patients there, they touch me very deeply. But the negative reactions can be very often portrayed through our body language, through our facial gestures, our tone of voice. And we can go, yes, anything else? And we stiffen. And the patient who is very much in these situations in a very sensitive state, wide open state, will be often feeling things more sensitive than you are, will read you, will sometimes, I've had patients say, Declan, you don't need to be thinking those thoughts when you're sitting with me.
Wow.
People who actually picked up on my thoughts, embarrassingly say, oh my God. And that particular thought that I'm thinking about was like, how am I going to be able to handle this? And the patient caught it and smiled and said, you don't need to think that. You just need to hear me out. So
Wow.
my thoughts, my negative thoughts could have impacted there. And being too quick to stop the experience, to prescribe remedies, to prescribe medications, to stop the experience, to stop the intensity, can leave them suspended in that liminal state. So if we see it as a crisis to be fixed, we'll try to stop it. If the experience is not integrated, that trauma will give rise to future trauma. So it's really,
That's a really
really
hard one though. Like, how do you, I mean, if you're prescribing a remedy, the remedy is going to create balance and the vital force is going to do with that what it feels that it needs to. So how do you prescribe so as not to hurry it up? Because that's a tricky one. How do you do that?
it's a tricky one. Integration is the key. Integration is the key. What are you doing in your life? What changes have you made in your life to bring new experiences in? How have you integrated this experience? So you've been through this incredible trauma. What sense have you made from it? What of that have you brought into your daily life? That determines for me whether the person has finished the treatment or not whether they've come through the crisis. So I've
seeing
learned,
have they come out changed? Like, have they if they didn't have a spiritual practice before, have they put something in place? If they were working like 90 hours a week, have they reduced that? Okay, are they out of the toxic relationship? That in addition, okay.
Absolutely. All of the above. So integration is the key. So we're working with it. I've made up a rubric for the homeopaths in the audience. These are the remedies that I found useful in spiritual emergency. I won't go through them all at the moment, but they're here in the slides. You can see them. You'll notice that quite a few of them will be somehow are so-called drug remedies or psychedelic remedies, remedies like LSD, remedies like MDMA, remedies like anhelonium, other remedies like Jeremy Sher's hydrogen, the old traditions, remedies like veratrum album, like stramonium. These are all remedies that come up again and again in my practice. And one of my remedies there in the bottom, Tabernanthe iboga. These are remedies that I use on a very regular basis. I'm dealing with this. I'm very conscious that the people who come to my practice are very often crazy folks and folks who, I have no children in my practice. I work with about 85% males. So I have an unusual practice, crazy men. And I guess
somebody
that
needs
might...
to care for them. Thank goodness it's you.
And yeah, and it is interesting. In Bali, I shared the change in my practice over the last 32 years, where it was a very simple kind of practice working in Bali with very, very serious pathologies, but people who are very healthy responding to single doses of remedies. And I work with people these days in very challenged and challenging mental states. So these are the kind of remedies that come up again and again.
You haven't got
So
ayahuasca on that list though, Declan. We'll
I
have
have
to edit.
it's
Oh,
there
did
as
you?
a Bani C.
Oh, what did you call it?
Bani C. It's Banisteriopsis capi. It's the
Oh,
Latin
I'm
name.
so glad that you've said that. Thank you. Excellent.
So, in terms of integration, so these are the things that I explore with my patients. And in my work, being homeopathic, how to be with the patients, how to be able to support them, that is as important as the remedy. And I've learned over the years to explore the other aspects. So what kind of things that can support you, that we can get very reductionist as therapists, that we can focus too much on our remedy. It's the remedy that cures. The remedy doesn't. The remedy is a catalyst in my world. The remedy is a stimulus. All healing, in my experience, is self-healing. The catalyst is the remedy. The catalyst is the space I hold for people, but it's all about self-healing. So the more that the patient is involved in their healing, the quicker the work gets done. I tell every one of my patients, my job is to get rid of you, and my job is to make myself redundant. So I really explore with people, what are they doing to bring this emergency, to bring this into a new emergence in their lives? What kind of things can help them? And the following are things that I found really useful. Eckhart Tolle, I'd consider him as one of my teachers, because he went through his own experience of massive depression and he had a psychotic break himself. And he doesn't speak too often about it, but I find this very useful. He said many people are going through the early stages of the awakening process and are no longer certain what their outer purpose are. What drives the world no longer drives them. Seeing the madness of our civilization so clearly, they feel somewhat alienated from the culture around them. This is our job, to provide a safe space for them now. Some people feel that they inhabit a no man's land between two worlds. They're no longer run by the ego, yet the arising awareness has yet not become fully integrated in their lives. The inner and the outer purpose have not merged. This is our work, to hold the space between the worlds, to be able to be in those liminal spaces with the people who come to us in crisis. They're recognizing that their old world, their old way of being in the world doesn't work anymore. So we need to help them to come into the new stage, and we need to hold that space for them. So when people have come through their crisis, they will sometimes have ongoing health problems because their physical body has to adapt with things. So these are the kind of challenges that we need to do when people come out of their crisis. So their nervous system may be massively wired up. They may have very much increased sensitivity, feeling things, and be overwhelmed very much. They have a strong need for supportive environment. They will often find themselves interested in spiritual things, but they need to have a strong sense of a context for that. And I really need to have people make a commitment to their self-care. Being of service to other people is very often a really helpful thing for people, and having a sense of a calling. People who've come through the spiritual emergency will often talk about, my life now has a purpose. And in Samuel Hahnemann's work, they often have a sense of the higher purpose. So these are the kind of things that people will often come through. So separation and isolation are the core experiences of psychological trauma. Empowerment and the reconnection are the core experiences of recovery. So Judith Harmon is an American therapist who's doing this kind of work. So Peter had just come out of having a psychotic breakdowns, panics, and severe paranoia. He said, I feel blessed by spiritual realizations, all-knowing states where I feel like God. I feel like a Buddha in these states. I feel like I know everything, but I can't share these things. I can't relate them to others. I want to go back to those worlds. These are worlds where I am completely at one with God, where I am God. But after his experience, he's not able to deal with himself. And he said, I've taken to food. I've become addicted to food. And he's had this really strong anorexia bulimic thing. He said, everything has become stuck in my gut. So this is a stage that I recognized from a remedy that I proved back in the 90s, Tabernanthe iboga. This is a remedy that's used in shamanic traditions in West Africa. It's a remedy that helps people to die and reborn. So to die to the physical world, people go into a trance state, they meet their ancestors to meet spirit, and they come back with the sense of their life purpose. People very often in this state, their lives change, but in this, the remedy proving, we have found that people have lost a sense of themselves, lost a sense of their purpose in life, lost a sense of connection with their ancestors. This particular guy, he was a patient who'd come from the Caribbean. His family were traditionally black people. They had worked on the sugar plantations, and his ancestors were slaves. So his connection was Africa. But he said, I kept having visions of people from Africa, but they were like demons to me. So we were working with this medicine to help him reconnect with his spiritual teachers, with his ancestors. And he said, I found much more grounded working in this. I feel like now I have a body. He said, I always had a will to live, but now I found myself able to come back to myself. I'm feeling I have a will to action. He said, that fire in my belly that I was stamping down with food, I feel it's alive in it. I feel like I'm a man for the first time in my life. And he made his spiritual journey to West Africa, where his ancestors had come from, as a result of the working with the remedies. So we worked together for a year. But he said the aliveness, he went on to become a therapist and did incredible work with patients. And he said, my patients, they come to me, my clients, he said, they come to me. And he said, I know what they need before they open their mouth. And he said, I don't tell them this because they would think I'm mad, but this has come from the healing work that I've done myself. So he would
Wow.
make the connection. He was able to drop into this to get over his experiences, but much more importantly, he was able to realign himself with his ancestral purpose. And his purpose, he said, was to be a healer. And he denied this all his life. So creating mental health, I like to talk about a number of different things with my patients. When the first thing is the need to normalize these states, that these are not crazy states. These are not things to be avoided. These are not things to be cured, but they need a safe container. They need a safe container in the practice. I need to hold a safe space for the person to feel safe enough to express themselves to it. I will very often talk to people's significant others that they need a safe container at home, because I can hold that space for an hour a week or whatever, but who's holding them when they're not in this? So in an ideal world, my colleague friend Michael and my vision was whoever won the lottery for the first time, we would create a community where people could go mad safely, who can be held in an environment where they could go through their experience of madness. They could be held and supported. There are therapeutic communities. When I was working at a festival in Portugal a few years ago, I had the grace to work with a psychiatrist who was in his 70s, and he'd run one in California where he
Wow.
didn't use any kind of conventional medication. They used a lot of body work and a lot of therapeutic interventions where people would have full-blown psychotic breakdowns, and they would support them, keep them safe, help them to integrate it. And he was fascinated, and because we worked together with me using homeopathy in the environment we were working with at the festival. He didn't know about homeopathy. So yeah, it's really interesting that there are people out there doing this work who don't treat people in these states as being crazy.
Isn't it amazing that even Samuel Hahnemann, more than 200 years ago, was, he was one of the forerunners of treating the mentally insane, is what they were called then,
Absolutely.
with
Yeah,
respect and
absolutely.
dignity and
Yeah,
with homeopathic remedies. Pretty amazing.
absolutely. And some of the really important work he did was physically taking care of people, making
Mm,
sure that they were physically looked after, were nourished, they were kept safe, all of
mm,
these things. And this, for me, is one of the most important thing. And Hahnemann was a man way ahead of his time in the 1790s, and actually, in many ways, is still ahead of our time, you know?
yeah.
So he was right, create an embodied connection.
Mm,
So people present with their so-called mental or spiritual problems, but the healing is actually in the body. is about bringing them into their body, having an embodied connection. So when people are having these experiences and they're describing to me, like I'm saying, well, where are you feeling it? What's going on in your body? Yeah. And the voices are telling me, and what's happening in your body? And I'm seeing these visions and God, yeah, but what's happening in your body from your neck down? And that provides an anchor, making sure the person has their feet on the ground, making sure that they're sitting into their posture, making sure that they have an embodied connection. That yes, they can be in those states, but they need their body. And the body is the key. The body is the key for releasing trauma. The body is the key to ground this experience. So I talk a lot about bodies. It's a lot about embodying. Kind of things that take people out of the body are extreme emotions. So I talk to people about managing panic, managing anger, managing stresses, and how they have different tools. I share different tools that I have, but I encourage people to develop their own way of working with these things, because these extreme states, they provide the crises. You know, they're managing a thing is moving along, and then something happens to create the panic, to create an intense emotion, and it just blows people's circuits wide open. Something that I've got from a lot of the meditation work that I've done over the years is developing the witness consciousness. I work a lot with the different metaphors in my work, but the chakra model is very important, working with energy. Crown chakra is about the witness, about observing what's going on, witnessing what's happening, inviting your patients. And I do this, having them in the practice. I have them go through these experiences. Well, can you just notice what's happening? What's happening in your body as we speak? What's happening with the thoughts? What's happening with the voices as we're talking here? So developing a sense of there are different levels of mind. So you can observe the processes and observe yourself observing it when you get into really skillful abilities with this. And this is an incredibly useful thing because it allows you to observe the voices, to observe the things and not get caught into it. So developing a practice of doing this, so some kind of meditative practice to do this, and developing a sense of mindfulness. Mindfulness is a hugely abused term these days. And in fact, the gentleman who gave the term mindful to Thich Nhat Hanh back 50 years ago, he said, shortly before he died, I said, I'm really sorry that I gave the term mindful, because in my language, Vietnamese, the word for heart and mind is the same. What I really meant was being more heartful. So being more embodied, being present in your body and breath. The key to being in your body is the breath. I do a lot of work with breath with my practice, inviting them to pay attention to their breath. The breath controls the consciousness. The breath controls the state of mind. Learning to consciously working with the breath means you're consciously dealing with your processes. You can help to deconstruct intense things. You can help to relax. You can do all sorts of things just by working with the breath. So I do this. I have my patients, all of my patients in challenging states. We work very, very much with the witness and the breath. Observing self-criticism, observing the parts of me that's judging me, and avoid comparisons with others and avoid comparisons with themselves. I should be. Should is a word that I like to ban from my practice. Many, many years ago from Louise Hay, I learned that should is one of those terrible words that whatever happens as a result of should, you're going to feel crap. So change should to could, give people the options to be able to respond rather than react, and develop gratitude for the skills you have, encouraging people to be able to respond to themselves with gratitude rather than self-criticism. So these are ways of just helping to create a new way of being in the world from an internal perspective. Grounding activities. People in these states are out of it, helping them to come back into their body. Anything you can do. And I explore this with my patients. I don't give them a long list of things to do, but the things that I found my patients benefiting from is any kind of exercise, getting off their arse, getting out, moving. Often people who are depressed or people who are in these states that they don't want to go there, but moving. Michael Curry's cure for depression was, he said, when you wake up in the morning, have your jogging outfit and your trainers beside the bed, be in your trainers, be in your hoodie and out the door before you remember who you are and that you're depressed. He never gave an antidepressant. So moving, running, dancing, drumming, chanting, singing, using your voice, All of these things bring you back into your body. I explore with my patient what brings you into your body and encourage them to do it. Of course, we're working with remedies. Of course, we're doing the normal work, but developing all of these things can be really, really helpful.
Mm.
You know, Helping people to stay in the process, to be able to avoid making any major life decisions until they've come through this process, developing purposeful activities, be mindful in their activities, even if it's washing dishes at home, working with creative things, doing things that are actually actively creating things, actively bringing in new skills, using the new sensitivity. People see things differently, feel things differently. Give that expression, give it form, make things, paint things, get out into nature. If you want to ground yourself, sit under a tree, be out in nature, be able to use your senses, be able to bring yourself to the world of the senses. Yeah. The senses are the gateway to the body. The breath is the gateway to the body, encouraging your patients to come into this. And if there are any physical things in the body with inflammation, do things to reduce inflammation in the body. Pay attention to the diet. Are you eating things that are causing inflammation, that are causing you to be overstimulated? Avoiding stimulating. People use all sorts of stimulants in their lives to keep going, to not feel their feelings. Yeah, explore these without judgment. Try to avoid stimulating yourself when you are already overstimulated. These kind of states people get into very disembodied and they very often forget about eating. Heavy foods, protein foods help people to come in. Staying hydrated. Most of us are actually quite dehydrated. And avoid fasting. A lot of people get into spiritual practice. I've had many patients. I could probably, off the tip of my head, I give you 5 or 6 different patients whose state of emergency got triggered by fasting, went into fasting. Fasting is a brilliant spiritual practice, but it brings people into a very intense state. So avoiding fasting, making sure that there's regular meals, everything becomes regular structures, systems where people can integrate it. And that absolutely applies to sleep and it applies to hormones. If you happen to have a female body and you have hormonal swings, they have to be managed as well. It's not enough just to give a remedy for the state. We need to look at the kind of things that are causing these problems, that are maintaining you in these problems, and helping to normalize these things. And something that's really, really important, staying away from these things. I was working at a festival at the last weekend, and there were thousands of people dancing with their phones, focused on themselves. Yeah. So they can post them and compare them with other people. This kind of comparison that comes with social media is seriously toxic.
Very
So I
toxic.
really invite my patients, because they're comparing themselves all the time. A digital detox is really important.
I heard this
And
great quote once that comparison is a thief of joy.
beautiful,
Mm.
beautiful. That's an absolutely beautiful thing. I'm going to borrow that one.
Yeah, take
Thank
it. It's yours.
thank you. And last, but by no means least, learning to ask for help. It took me many, many years and deepest trauma in my life before I could actually ask for help. And I thought, okay, now I've done something really great, learning to ask for help. It took me quite some years after that to learn to receive it. So encouraging the patients to be able to ask for help. The fact that they've come to you asking for help is already a big step forward, and recognize what a big deal that is, that patients are actually asking for help. Be able to really stay in the field of that
Mm.
and encourage them to be able to continue that process. That no matter how much you do in this world, I took on a lot of my patients' energies in the early days of doing this kind of work, because I felt I had to do this, and I had to learn to ask for help from people who know about this kind of world, and learn to receive help from this, and encouraging my patients to do this as well, because we can't carry this for our patients. We need to have the patients build a network. And this is something, before I finish the work that I do with my patients, I need to have established that they now have a network of people that they have been actively reaching out to, actively asking for help, and actively receiving that help, then I can be able to, with my blessing, have them go on their way, and then they are cured. I hate that term, but that's at that point. Oh, thank you, Apple.
That's I don't know how that got there. That was weird. Wonder where that came from. Did you click
Hey,
on
there you
something?
go.
No, that
So
was odd. Well,
asking and receiving for help, this is something to really to celebrate, to be able to say, yes, now you can go on your way. So people have not just gone through their emergency, they've come out the other side of it, they've emerged with a new way of being in the world, but with a new kind of network of people who are supporting them. And often people have had to make new friends, because often in these kind of states, people's friends and family shun them, because sadly, we don't want to know about these kind of states. People are being really marginalized, and have been marginalized in our culture for such a long period of time because of these kind of states. So encouraging people to talk to people, to develop friendships, and to talk to family members who get this stuff. And that's how we build new communities of people who are open to new ways of being in the world. And for me, this is really, really important. And to quote another one of my teachers, a radical inner transformation and a rise to a new level of consciousness might be the only real hope we have in this current global crisis. This is really important stuff. We're not going to resolve the problems of individuals and society with the same kind of thinking that we've had forever. We need a new level of consciousness. People coming through these states with new spiritual emergencies may be our only hope.
and we
So,
certainly can't heal all these problems with the same state of mind that created them in the
no.
first place. So we definitely.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just, for me, this is a thought that I'd like to hold in our conversation here, because this is the work we're doing. We're not just out there to fix people, to heal people, to cure people. We're about trying to create inner transformations for people, trying to bring about a new level of consciousness. And for me, this is a really hopeful thing. And this is where I put my work and where I put my focus. And this is where I can be found. I work with individuals, groups who do ceremonial work. I run a training course called the Rainbow Bridge with my partner for a healing practice, and here are my details.
Ah, Declan, I just don't even know what to say. You always leave me speechless. In person, I can say that now too, and online. Your teaching is just so beautiful. And I think it's so extra special because it always comes from the heart and it comes from lived experience. Like, I think the way in which you share is just what also makes it so profound. So thank you. Thank you so much for this. I had a real, like a bit of an inner turmoil because I was trying to figure out how is like voices that say you need to hurt yourself a gift. Like I was just trying to like, I don't understand it. And then also like if you're in a traditional community, I mean, is that always triggered by traumas that they've gone through as well? Or is that just part of their journey that some selected people or whatever go through that they choose to
Mm.
incarnate? Or is it always from some sort of trauma? But when you talked about the integration, that's actually, it sounds like that is where the gift is. So I can understand that now because I was trying to see where's the silver lining on a voice that says you have to hurt yourself.
Yeah, well, I was trying to get across earlier. It's like be curious about the voices and
Mm,
curious about the experiences,
yeah.
rather than being overwhelmed by them, and just
Mm,
listening to them. And mostly those voices make complete sense.
mm,
And the lady who'd gone through the spousal rape thing, like the voice, she didn't recognize the voice that was telling her to cut herself. But
mm,
when she really listened to the voice, it was this really abusive ex-husband, you
mm,
know, that the voices, see the difficulty with these voices, they're very often voices from childhood, voices of parents, voices of teachers, voices of abusers. Many of the voices are encouraging voices, but
mm,
we are so brought up to be self-critical, to be judgmental, that we take on much easier the negative voices. And we don't often listen to the other voices, the voices that are saying, yeah, Eugene, you can do it. You're doing amazing work there. One would go for it. We listen to, oh, you didn't get that right. And you didn't ask that question at the right time.
Yep, all the
So,
time.
but this is human nature, the way most of us are being brought up. But by actively listening to the voices, and this is the essence of homeopathy for me, being with the suffering. How can we really be with this? We can't be really with the voices and really understand the voices if we're busy trying to find rubrics to cure them.
Yeah.
When we listen to them and learn from them. And Jackie Dillon has some really great work, and she's actually created a thing called the Hearing Voices Network, where people can actually meet people who are having these kinds of voices, and they like to hear people and the gifts they've had when they start to listen to, and the fun they have. She did a piece of theatre for Irish radio about 10 years ago, and she had 10 different voices talking, and 10 different people doing the voices in her head. And it was hilarious. Like, this was after many years of therapy, and like she'd learned so much from them. And I remember having one particular guy who had 40 distinct voices in his head. And he said, I said, what's it's like in your head? And he said, now, after the work we did, it's like having an effing party in my head the whole time, he said. He was very blunt in his expression. But it's like, this is the kind of thing where people can live with their experiences, not get rid of them, to actually embrace a much bigger sense of themselves, that these are all different sub-personalities, and we all have sub-personalities. But when we get to know them and engage with them and have fun with them, it can be a whole new way of being in the world. And yeah, it's just gorgeous. It's an incredible privilege to be in the presence of people who have these kind of experiences.
So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a case of once you've healed that trauma of the rape from the ex, that the voices or the experience will go away. Is that
Mm.
kind of that's not necessarily the goal, is it? So the goal, if somebody presents with several voices in the head and it's related back to trauma, and you heal
Mhm.
that trauma with therapies or with homeopathics, the goal
Mhm.
isn't necessarily to have the voices go away, or how would
Absolutely
you?
not.
Okay.
No, the voice is not to make the go away. The voice is for the person to integrate their inner experience, so the traumatic experiences, and to be able to deal with this in a balanced way. So when people's voices are telling them to hurt themselves or hurt someone else, you know, it's listening to other voices and putting that voice in perspective.
Mm.
But that's a process. It's a process of getting to know the voice and understanding why that voice is telling you to hurt yourself,
Mm.
because that's a voice that doesn't have your well-being at heart. There are other voices that do have your well-being at heart, and just tune more and more into them. It's not getting rid of one. It's making sure that you're expanding your awareness to deal with all of them and bringing in that witness. Like, that's comes in again and again in my work, just witnessing it, being curious about these states, being willing to meet them. Like, it's the essence of homeopathy, being with suffering, allowing yourself to really be there with the person, inviting them to be there with the person, with these different states that they're in. And that's just can be a beautiful thing, when you hear that somebody is having a continuous party in their heads with 40 different voices. It's hilarious. Yeah.
And at the same time, also unbelievably sad when we think of how we treat our people who are going through these
Absolutely.
experiences, and we just drag
Absolutely.
them up without allowing them the opportunity or the gift to be able to integrate
Yeah.
that into their lives. It is
Absolutely.
very
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And particularly sad because, like looking at people like Malidoma Somé and his work, it's like these are people, potential healers. In traditional cultures, they would be considered the shaman, the healers, the wise women, the people that you'd go to because they have access. They live in a liminal place. They have access to the other realms. And they are the people who are potential healers. And yeah, we've pathologized them, we lock them up, we try to fix them, instead of supporting them, helping them cultivate these experiences. What we do in these states is shamanic work. And this is the realm of being in this space. And as healers, as homeopaths, we are the person holding the space between the worlds for people and hopefully holding a place for people to be held and supported and where they can safely integrate this experience and bring it into their lives. Like, the pleasure I get from this work is just incredible. When you hear people sharing, and I shared just a handful of patients here, but when you hear people from the other side of the really intense experience, and they're living in a new way of being in the world, it's just like, wow, you know.
Well, for anyone listening who is going through a spiritual emergency or knows somebody that is, I know that this will give them a lot of hope. And for any practitioners and specifically homeopaths listening to this, I hope that it's given you a new way of looking at your clients and your patients and being able to hold space for them and being able to see things in a new light and the healing that you are able to bring. So thank you for this beautiful gift today, Declan. I really appreciate it so much.
You're very welcome. Always a pleasure, Eugene.
Talk soon. Bye.
Okay, bye now.